Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a mesmerizing session of ENG4E Term 2A, brought to you by WASA Distance Education Center. Today's date is Wednesday, April the 12th, 2023, and I am your instructor, Mike Laverty. Today's date marks class 23 of our 34 classes together. So tomorrow will, of course, be the final broadcast for ENG4E Term 2A. And we are spending this last week together what I hope will be, very useful time spent preparing you to write the final exam. So this is day 2 of that. So we have 3 days of this. We've got yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We'll be doing this for 3 days. And I was just trying to brainstorm some ways that I could prepare you for the final exam, and find some ways that we could practice our skills together, and prepare you for just prepare you for writing for writing that that final exam, which will be worth 20% of your final grade. So this is week 9 of Term 2A. Term 2A is a 9-week term, with this this being the last one, and then Term 2B starts tomorrow. Sorry, starts Monday, and that's our final final term of the school year. That one's 10 weeks, so 9 weeks of broadcasts, and then an admin week, and then at the end of that admin week, we have the graduation date coming up. So. With our remaining time together, I will once again remind students about that very important deadline. You need to keep that in your mind, that once June 15th comes and goes, then this school year is over, and you will have had to take your final exam and get your credit by that date. And you can't carry the work you put in this school year into the next school year. So you have to get it done now, right? So you've got one more term, and I think for all those out there listening, if you haven't started a chorus, or you barely gotten started in a chorus, then it's realistic that you could finish it in the next term, in the next 9 weeks to come. I think that's realistic. You could finish off one chorus. But you have to ask yourself, like, how much time do you have? Can you give this an hour a night? Do you have that? If you want to get 2 credits done, then you've got to devote several hours, every night to do the reading and to do the work. So if you don't have the luxury of a few hours every night, then you have to be realistic with your time and just, make a tough decision. But there certainly is time to get one of these credits done. So if you're working on ENG4E and that's the credit you need to get, then by all means reach out to me, reach out to other staff members here at WASA, and we can make that happen for you. We can work together, we can collaborate, we can find ways to work together. But you have to start reaching out now, and you have to start making a plan today. And that brings me to our course schedule. So with our previous classes together, so classes 1 through 32, we 31, I guess, we talked about units 1, 2, 3, and 4. So there are 4 units in this course, each one with a culminating activity. And then we spent last week taking a deeper look at the novel. So this is our novel, Where the Rivers Meet, and Unit 2 really is devoted almost entirely to discussions of the novel, Where the Rivers Meet. So that novel study week is also very beneficial for you to complete the assignments in Unit 2. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, the final exam will have some questions about the novel there too. So having a deep understanding of the novel, so simply, just going beyond just reading it, understanding it on a deeper level is really important to passing this course, to completing Unit 2, and also for writing the final exam. So the final exam is, of course, worth 20% of your final grade in this course. So it's a big chunk of that grade. And ideally, you are writing a 2-hour timed test, timed exam, and someone will need to be in the room with you while you do it. So it does require you to set some things up. It does require some coordination. You've got to talk to your DEC. So the DEC or someone in your home community can sit with you, and they can verify that you are in a certain time and a place and following the rules. And, you know, because you're not allowed to bring anything into the test other than, you know, your own mind and some writing utensils. So that all needs to be figured out ahead of time. If you're listening online, thanks for joining us on the radio, I should say, at 91.9 FM or Bell ExpressVu channel 972. You can always phone the studio with a question, a story, a joke, comment, anything you want. 1-800-465-7144 or locally at 1-807-737-4017. You can join us on Zoom by going to zoom.us or loading up the Zoom app on your phone, hitting the join button, and then you can type in the meeting ID, 417-669-9799. All of these classes, eventually, you know, starting with tomorrow, all 34 classes will be on my playlist. So go to my YouTube channel, ENG4E. Go to my YouTube channel and then type in or just click on the playlist button, and you'll find all the videos that are related to this course. Reach out to me directly through email. I prefer mlaverty, MLAVERTY, at nnecschools.org. Or find me on Facebook. Look for Laverty Wassa. That's my professional Wassa account. So that's Laverty Wassa. And phone the office here at 1-807-737-1488 or toll free at 1-800-667-3703. So you want to do that right now if you need help with this chorus, if you need help with if you're a potential grad, for example, or if you're just wondering about how many credits you can realistically complete this year, then now is the time to use that contact information. You can also go to the Facebook page, and you can go to the Facebook page, the WASA Facebook page, send us a message directly, or email us, or phone us. Just some way, get in touch with us. All right, so let's go to today's lesson. So we will look at Rude Awakenings. This is a short biography about Canadian comedian Tom Green. So this is a selection from another course I teach. That's ENG4E. So that's one of the assigned readings from that. Actually, it's not an assigned reading, but it's one of the selections from the anthology, The Road Ahead. If we have time, we might do this tomorrow, depending on how much time we have. We're going to look at editing some paragraphs. So I have some paragraphs that are purposely misspelled. They have grammatical mistakes, and then your job is to go in there and fix them. So if we have time, we'll do a live demonstration of that. But if not, then that's certainly what we'll do tomorrow. Your learning goals are to take notes as we do a close reading of a text, Rude Awakenings. You will practice the valuable skill of analyzing a text by identifying its context. So, where it was published, when it was published, its audience, who was it meant for, its format, how was it organized, its purpose, why was it written, who was it for, its content, what's in it, how was it written, is it funny, is it serious, and then maybe also looking at the elements of narrative, right? So if it's written like a story, then you can talk about things like conflict and theme and characters and plot. And if we have time, you will test your knowledge of grammar, parts of speech, spelling, etc. as we edit paragraphs together. You will be successful, and this is what it's all about. So today's class is all about helping you create your own strategy in anticipation of taking the final exam. So that's really what you're doing, right? So instead of just showing up for the final exam and just winging it and trying to figure out as best you can, which I have done in the past, and it's never worked out for me, but I know it happens. We get busy and we lose sight of priorities and all that. So instead of doing that, so instead of just rolling up unprepared, you are creating a strategy. And your strategy includes studying beforehand, reviewing your previous assignments, looking at places where you did well, finding places where you could improve, practicing your skills. And today we're going to practice our reading skills and our writing skills, because those are the foundational literacy skills that you need in life. To be a better communicator, to excel in the workplace, to go on to post-secondary education, you need reading skills and you need writing skills. And the final exam in ENG4E will test your reading skills and it will test your writing skills. And often, in a very related, looking for the right word here, in a very connected way, right? So you'll read something and then immediately write about it, right? Right? So you're practicing your ability to sort of like size up and analyze a text and to understand it and sort of put it in its box and understand it, right? So, one example could be like an art expert, or like someone who's an expert in like a certain kind of paintings, like woodland paintings, for example, right? Like there was a huge story about Norval Morisot in the news, right? And these like elaborate ring of fakers and counterfeiters who are creating these fake paintings of his and trying to sell them off as the real thing. And so when that happens, you have to rely upon the experts, and the experts are good at looking at something and analyzing it and knowing its context and understanding how it was made and when it was made and who it was made for and what kind of techniques were used and what kind of material was used, right? So that's how we analyze something, right? We break it down into its parts. But we don't just do that. We don't just break things down into their little parts. We also look at the thing as a whole, right? So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So looking at an article as a whole, how it affects us, how it impacts us as readers, but we're also looking at, how can we break this text down into its component parts and talk about it intelligently, right? And that really is what it's all about, right? Especially when it comes time to writing when it comes time to responding to a text for an English exam. So when you're taking an English final exam and your teacher gives you a text to read, which they will do, right? So that's no surprise, right? So when you go to write this final exam, you should not be surprised to see a brand new text that you've never seen before, because that's the whole point. That's the game, right? It's here's something you've never seen before. Demonstrate, and then you're demonstrating your ability to read it. And before you came into this class, you might not have the vocabulary, or might not know where to begin, might not know how to talk about a text and how to, because that's what we're doing in today's class, is giving you ways to talk about a text. And once you know those ways of talking about a text, you can apply them to any text. So we're gonna read a specific. We're gonna discuss a specific text today, but the tools that we use to talk about it, you can apply to anything, right? So that's kind of what we're doing here. It's almost like a math class, right? You learn the formula, so you can answer any question, right? You're not you don't just learn how to memorize what the solution is. You learn how to apply it you learn how to apply the tool in different situations, right? So, all right. So with that being said, we'll jump right in. So I want you to imagine that you have just sat down for your you've just sat down to write an exam, and you've looked over the exam. So maybe I'll walk you through that process, right? So everybody's different, but and I'm only speaking from experience, but I think I've learned a lot by going to school, and I've learned definitely how not to do things. I've made a lot of mistakes, and one strategy to do is, step one is just put the exam in front of you and just look at it, and then take a deep breath and practice some deep breathing. And trust me, you're not wasting time by doing this. This is good practice for any situation where you're going to be tested and it could be stressful. Take some slow breaths in, count till 3 or 4. Take some slow breaths out, count even longer, 4 or 5 seconds. Just seriously, like, take the 10 seconds to do that. Even just one cycle of deep breath in, deep breath out. And then get yourself settled and say, okay, tell yourself I can do this. And then read the entire exam package. And then you might want to employ some reading strategies here. Like, you don't want to actually read the whole booklet. I would just skim it and just say, like, okay, I'm here for 2 hours. How many parts are on this exam? How are the parts weighted, right? So have a look at the questions. Make some quick mental notes on what's being asked of you and how are these things weighted. Is there 3 questions and they're each worth 20, or are some of the sections worth more? So just have a look at it and then find out where you want to begin. And you don't have to start with question 1. So let's say, for example, you want to start with the reading assignment and you start with this one. So you're being asked, so it would say, please read the following essay, Rude Awakenings by Shannon Hawkins, and then answer the following question. So I would look at the questions first and then answer them. And so some of those questions might be, like, how is this essay organized? What type of an essay is this? What is the format of this essay? What is the main idea being expressed in this essay? Other questions might include, like, provide examples of Tom evading or trying to escape his parents. What job does Tom end up getting that leads to his future success as a comedian, right? So you're going to have specific questions about the text. So I would read those questions, give them some brief thought, and then at least those questions will be kind of logged in some point of your mind, right? And so, yeah, so take a deep breath, read the exam booklet, find your starting point, and then dive right in. And, read the questions first. All right, so with that in mind, I will start reading the article. And one tactic that I'm going to start with is I'm going to start by numbering my paragraphs, right? So this is paragraph 1, P1, and I'm going to make some notes about it once I've read. So what I'll do is I will read the paragraphs one by one, and then we'll have a quick discussion about each paragraph. So because, it's hard to talk about an essay on a sentence-by-sentence level. There's just too many sentences to keep track of. But for a short text or a short essay that's maybe 5 or 6 paragraphs, it's pretty easy for you to visualize those 5 paragraphs and to remember what they were about. And, in a sense, you're creating an outline of the text. A shorthand for memorizing what it's about and how it's organized and how it all flows together. So paragraph 1 reads as follows. As he tiptoed in through the back door of his parents' house, it took a moment for Tom's eyes to adjust to the darkness. Navigating a path around the kitchen furniture, he made his way soundlessly into the living room and, stopping mid-stride, peered into the darkness for signs of life. Glancing down the first floor corridor that led to his parents' bedroom, he breathed a sigh of relief as nobody stirred. Everybody was still sound asleep. He'd managed to sneak in past curfew. Again, in another summer evening of kamikaze skateboarding with his friends. Sorry, he managed to sneak in past curfew after another summer evening of kamikaze skateboarding with his friends. Taking off his sneakers and leaving them on the living room floor, he quietly descended the back stairs to deposit his skateboard in the rec room. Quote, 1, 2, 3, 4, he said to himself, mentally calculating how many hours sleep he could get in before his parents got up for work. That's plenty of time. Sneaking into his disheveled bedroom, he switched on the small lamp in the corner. He stumbled through the piles of clothes, skateboarding stuff, and music equipment, littering the floor, and flopped limply down on the bed. Rolling over, he grabbed his clock from the bedside table and set the alarm for 6 a.m. He pulled the comforter up over his body, and he drifted off to sleep. All right, so we want to be, expert readers here, and we want to practice our skills, and we want to size up this essay or this memoir biography. It's important to talk about it as what it is, right? To talk about it intelligently, right? So I would make some notes to myself what we're dealing with here. So it's an essay. It is nonfiction. More specifically, it's a memoir / biography. It's not an autobiography because it's not written by Tom Green, but it's an essay. It's nonfiction. It's a memoir. It's a biography. But it's at least the first paragraph. It's told like a story. It reads like a novel, right? So this is a good time to mention that there is a specific kind of writing that is known as creative nonfiction. And creative nonfiction is when someone writes about things that really happened, but they write about them as if it's a novel. So like if you picked it up and you didn't know it was a true story, you might think it's a novel, right? So it has really descriptive paragraphs. It talks about a main character doing stuff or shares the inner the thoughts of the the inner thoughts of the main character. It has dialogue, so the way the paragraphs are set up, it reads like it could be fiction, but it's not. It's actually based off a true story. The novel Angela's Ashes is like one of the most famous examples. So it's a true story, but if you just flip through it, it actually looks kind of like a novel. All right, so paragraph 1 is, it's like it's a scene, and I use the word scene. That's really important. It's a scene from Tom's life. His young life. So it's a scene from Tom's youth, right? So it's I'm very familiar with Tom Green because I kind of grew up watching him when he in his early days, and I forgot to mention that he's very much like a pioneer, and he was producing like really cheap videos on like a home video camera when he was in his late teens and early 20s, and he had a really successful show, The Tom Green Show, and a lot of people have pointed to him as being like a pioneer in the field, and seeing how a lot of YouTube creators and a lot of YouTube stars and a lot of podcasters today are very much inspired by Tom, and his sort of energy he brings is like this very playful energy where he pranks people and he gets reactions out of people, and he's just very wacky and quirky, and just he's a very weird guy, but it works for him. And so I would say that first paragraph, it's a scene from Tom's youth. It's almost like a movie. There's so many great details. It's very action orientated. It's Tom sneaking in. You don't know why he's sneaking in. From a very technical point of view, the author uses lots of commas to sort of guide us through. So, navigating a path around the kitchen furniture, comma. He made his way soundlessly into the living room, comma. And, comma, stopping mid-stride, peered into the darkness for signs of life. So that's a really great sentence with lots of drama built into it. I think they're using the commas for dramatic effect. You're supposed to picture Tom just like sneaking and then stopping, sneaking and then stopping, and then looking into his looking down the hallway to make sure he doesn't get caught. So that's our first paragraph. It reads very much like a novel. We're thrown right into the story. We don't know about Tom. We don't know who he is. All we know is a young kid, and he's sneaking into his house to get some rest before his parents wake him up. Okay, paragraph number 2. It felt like only a few minutes before 6 a.m. arrived. On cue, the blaring alarm clock signaled the dawn of a new day. Tom silenced the annoying ring with a smack. A moment later, he bolted upright and stared at the ceiling, listening intently for footsteps from overhead. Silence, absolute silence. Throwing the covers on the floor, Tom grabbed a pillow from the bed and a t-shirt from the pile of laundry scattered on the floor and then rushed for the basement stairs, trying to make as little noise as possible and looking over his shoulder to make sure no one was watching him. Satisfied he was alone, Tom pushed aside the retractable door hiding the opening under the stairs. He stuffed himself into the damp crawl space and closed the door softly behind him. Alone in the tiny quarters, he nestled his head into the pillow and drifted off to sleep with a goofy, self-satisfied smile on his face. His parents would never find him there. He was safe for another day from their threat of forced summer employment. He would make it his full-time job to spend the summer outsmarting them and avoiding doing any real labor. There was no way he was going to spend his teen years working at some mind-numbing job. He had bigger plans, and his parents were just going to have to accept it, or else try to find him. Either way, it was more exciting than scouring the want ads. All right, so paragraph 2. Paragraph 2 is really about, it's sort of like split into 2 parts. The first one is a continuation of the scene, and it's using like scenes, like almost like a movie or a novel. So it's a continuation of the scene in paragraph 2, and then it introduces the conflict. Now, all great stories have a conflict at the heart of them, right? And so this, while this is a nonfiction piece, it's written as a story. It's a story about a young man's life, and all stories are made interesting through a conflict, right? And so, and that conflict is, I would argue is Tom versus his parents, right? That's on a very general level. So the conflict, it introduces the conflict that Tom and his parents are, and then we've had some suggestions of a conflict, right? There's got to be a reason why he's being so sneaky, and there's got to be a reason why he's trying so hard not to wake them up, and then messing with them by sleeping in this like crawl space, right? So there's got to be a reason, but then we find out what that reason is, right? He was safe for another day from their threat of forced summer employment. Yeah, and so we hear about that. So they've got this game going on, right? They want him to get a job. He doesn't want to have a job, and he's having a lot of fun outsmarting them. Right, so it's exciting to him to sort of trick his parents and to not be forced to work. Paragraph 3. I just wanted to spend my summer skateboarding, and they were really kind of strict about, like, getting jobs. That's a direct quote from Tom. Tom said, recalling his childhood during one interview. Quote, they really wanted me to work. Quote, end quote. Tom's parents had bigger career goals for their eldest son. They weren't too keen on his plans to spend the summer lounging around their Beacon Hill home or wasting his days skateboarding. As soon as June rolled around, Richard and Mary Jane began their ritual pleas for Tom to get a job. Quote, every summer they'd wake me up every morning at 7 a.m., said Tom, thinking back to those mornings as a 15-year-old kid trying to outsmart his parents. Quote, and I'd been out skateboarding till 3 a.m. the night before. It was crazy. The scenes in the morning were crazy when I was a kid. And so paragraph 3 is important because we get Tom's thoughts about this conflict, right? About the conflict in paragraph 2. So we're paying attention to how each paragraph builds. And that's really good advice to you when you think about crafting your own responses to a question, and when you think about crafting your own essays and your own paragraphs, right? Just paying attention to how other writers do it. And that's really the way it should work, is that each paragraph should build upon the next one. Paragraph 1 introduces us to Tom by showing him in action, by showing him sneaking into his house. Paragraph 2 shows us what he did once he finally snuck in, and then it sort of gives us clues as to, why he did it. Paragraph 3, it gives us clues by actually saying what the conflict is that he's got between him and his parents. Paragraph 3 is Tom's thoughts about the conflict that's introduced in paragraph 2. So we've got, we're hearing his thoughts. All right, and then we've got paragraph 4. When the Greens finally realized their pleas for Tom to obtain gainful employment were being ignored, they decided to try a new approach. If reasoning with him wasn't going to work, they'd have to retaliate at his own level. Before the pair left for the office, they'd creep into Tom's bedroom and hover over his sleeping body, waiting for just the right moment to strike. One would stand at the foot of the bed, ready to yank the covers off the sleeping lump, while the other would be poised at the center, ready with a jug of water. In one quick motion, the covers would go flying across the room, and Tom would jump from the bed just as the cold liquid splashed against his bare stomach. Howling with the agony of a wounded seal, Tom, now cold and soaking wet, vowed to get even with his parents. This meant war. In fact, it only took a few early morning wake-ups before he devised a plan of his own. There was no way he was going to let them have the upper hand. He started eluding them by finding strategic places around the house where he could hide from their disruptions to his beauty sleep. He'd make little sleeping areas behind the furnace or under the basement stairs, then set his alarm for 6 a.m., when he'd sneak into his makeshift bed and fall back to sleep until he heard his parents leave for work. That's eventually what I had to resort to doing, Tom laughed. Then I go back to my bed and sleep until noon. One strategy I would like you to do while you read this is, so I'm making notes in the margin, like I'm writing down the different paragraphs and creating an outline for myself. You might want to highlight lines like howling with the agony of a wounded seal. That's a great metaphor. It's very descriptive. And it's very funny. That's a line that you can talk about specifically. And that's what I recommend that you do, right? So when you're given a specific text to write about, you have to be as specific, I can't say that word today, be as specific as possible. And mention specific lines from that essay, right? And so you want to cite specific lines, specific paragraphs. just demonstrate that you've read the article carefully and you can point to specific spots in it. And then more than that, you can explain what they mean and what they, how they contribute to the overall story. So that's paragraph 4. And paragraph 4 is sort of like, the parents, how did they say it? They have, the parents try a, quote, new approach. And Tom adapts. So they're having this game back and forth, right? So his parents do this, and then he adapts, and he kind of makes it work. All right, paragraph 5. The cat and mouse games, both Tom and his parents have confessed, lasted for most of Tom's teen years. The stunts changed daily, as did the score. On occasions when Tom was the victor, he'd claimed he, quote, broke them in because they finally realized they weren't going to get me to work that way. Those times when his parents came out on top, he'd end up skateboarding down the streets of Ottawa, searching for summer employment. Quote, I did get jobs, he confessed. I did always end up working at some crazy construction job because my dad wouldn't make me go find a job in construction. So that's probably, one of the shorter paragraphs in this selection. And this, I would say this is, the parents win on some level. Tom relents. And, he looks for a job and looks for work. And the final paragraph is paragraph 6. Knowing that from an early age Tom had a mind and personality of his own, Richard Green was constantly trying to convince him to learn a trade. So I'd spend the whole summer knocking asbestos out of ceilings. Oops. So I'd spend the whole summer knocking asbestos out of ceilings, Tom said, chuckling to himself. He was in the military and he wanted me to do something like working in a carpentry shop carving wood. But hammering nails or fixing a leaky kitchen faucet wasn't exactly what Tom had in mind. If he was going to get a job, it was going to have to be something creative and entertaining. The answer came with a simple phone call. Telemarketing, of course. Contracted by an Ottawa company, Tom said he spent the summer days doing telephone sales. Well, sort of. Quote, I always ended up working in telemarketing because I'd get to do crank calls all day, Tom said. What actually happened, without anyone even knowing it, was that Tom was using his job experiences as a training ground for his comedy. He was developing some very crafty schemes, especially where his parents were concerned. An invaluable skill in his future career. And so if we go back, and paragraph 6 is, of course, this is our conclusion. We've got the, the happy ending. Tom gets a real job. And he practices his skills. And so that's, that's just helpful for me. That's the approach that I would take, but it's the approach that I suggest that you also take with your writing when you've been asked to look at an assignment like this. So paragraph 1 is a scene from Tom's youth. It reads kind of like a movie. Paragraph 2 provides a continuation of that scene, and then it introduces the conflict of the story. So this is, Tom versus his parents. Paragraph 3 is Tom's thoughts about the conflict, introduced in paragraph 2. Paragraph 4, his parents try a new approach. Tom adapts to that approach. Paragraph 5, the parents win on some level. Tom relents and looks for work. And then paragraph 6 is when Tom, is a conclusion. It's a happy ending. He gets that job and he practices those skills for his job. And so that, so we've analyzed the work. We've read it. We've made notes as we've gone along. Hopefully we've highlighted some things that we think are going to help us answer the question. We can see how the article is organized. We can see how the paragraphs come together to tell a story. If we think about this article, now we've kind of looked at it on a deeper level, and so we can think about like the elements of narrative, for example, and we can say, what's the plot of the story? The plot of the story is that Tom did this, but his parents wanted him to do that, so they fought back and forth, and then he eventually got a job telemarketing, and then that telemarketing job and his attempts to escape his parents and all that has led him to his career in comedy, right? So that's the plot. What's the theme of this article? What's the main idea? That's kind of like a deeper question that you have to ask yourself, right? So what was the author trying to do with this article, right? So maybe with that being said, I will go back into my original slide deck for our last little bit of time together here. Whoops. There we go. Pull up my notebook here. Okay, so we already looked at the format of the piece. You might want to talk about the purpose of this. So is it to entertain? Is it to inform? Is it to persuade us, right? So I think it's informative in the case that it gives a lot of information about Tom, and it tells you it gives you insights into his life, but it's not like an encyclopedia entry where it's just listing information. It's I would say that it's very much it's entertainment, right? And that is the purpose of the author. She's trying to entertain you, right? And so that's one thing that you might be asked about in the final exam. But even if you're not, it's just good to have that vocabulary and have that ability to talk about a text. So it's entertaining, right? And it's how does it entertain? Right, and I would say that it entertains by storytelling. It entertains by using humor. It entertains by it's through exciting scenes. So that's important to think about. What's the purpose of this article, and how does it actually achieve that? If we talk about the we can talk about the characters, right? Look at the elements of narrative, right? Who is he? This goes back to our character sketch. What motivates him? And you can answer questions there, right? Another thing to identify is the main idea. You know, what is the main idea being expressed in this essay? So again, it's not an encyclopedia entry. It's not a complete discussion of Tom Green's youth. It's, you know, it's really meant to entertain you. So I think it's funny, but, you know, it's and this is where, you know, like, I think, and again, there's a primary purpose. That's the number one job. So the number one job is to entertain you, but along the way, you're also getting some you're also getting some key information along the way too, right? So what are we trying to say, right? So, and something like this, right? The path to success is a winding one, right? And that also ties in with our theme, right? And so the plot is simply what happens. That is, and that's what we call directly stated information. So some of the questions you might have to answer on the final exam are going to be, you know, like, provide an example of Tom evading his parents. How did Tom's father feel about Tom's antics? Where did Tom finally get a job, right? So you're being asked to find specific information in the text. And then there's questions that are asking for indirectly stated information. So information that is not said by the author. The author doesn't start the essay by saying, this is an article about Tom Green. It's going to be about him discovering his path as a comedian. All of that stuff is left unsaid. It's up to you as a reader to identify the theme, to identify sort of like the deeper meaning of the story, right? So what's the theme? What's the main idea? What's the deeper meaning? You know, what is it? You know, what is the moral of this story, and how do we get there, right? And how does the author actually make that happen, right? And then you may be asked to make some connections. So you can make connections between the text, or maybe more importantly, you make connections with your own life, right? So you may be asked to write about your own life and how you sort of compare yourself to Tom, and how you might see yourself in his situation and what you would do differently, right? So, and then, like all things, you're identifying things in the text, and then bringing your own thoughts and your own opinions to the table, right? And that's where it gets really interesting, and that's where you need to have those skills. You need to have that understanding to talk about a work intelligently, to have an opinion on it, right? So it's almost like if you were to watch a movie and to provide your opinion of that movie, and you wanted people to take you seriously, and you wanted to have a debate about it, and you wanted to, right, you would have to ask, like, what's the purpose of this movie? What is it meant to do? Who are the main characters? What's the main idea? What's the theme? What is it really getting at here? What's the what's the main message? And how was it written? And what tactics did the writer use? And, you know, how do they organize their text? And what words did they use? And what patterns do you see, right? So a lot of it comes down to that, just like recognizing patterns and just paying close attention, right? And making notes in a strategic way, because you only have a limited amount of time to write the final exam, so you have to be strategic with your time, And if you employ some of the strategies that I've introduced in today's class, you're going to have success. And you just have to find ways of organizing your thoughts. And it all comes down to time management and just knowing that your time is limited. But if you're careful and you plan it out and you take notes and you jot down an outline and you highlight things you're going to talk about, then I guarantee you, you're going to have some success. That's all the time we have for today. We will continue our discussion tomorrow for our final class. See you then.